Hello everyone and welcome to the Council of Elrond, your number one podcast for all things Middle-earth. I'm here as usual with my brother Dave, and we're here for another review and breakdown of this week's Rings of Power episode number 4, entitled Eldest. Obviously Dave referring to Nori.
Oh, I was going to say my dad. Yes, to
right.
Mr. Bombadil.
Right, okay, we'll get there. So yeah, obviously referring to Mr. Bombadil himself. So finally, he makes an appearance. But before we get into all that, here with us this week to help us analyse and comb through this episode, our dear friend Harry, creator of the well-known Fellowship of Fans. And now, unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you'll have come across their YouTube, their Twitter or X, their Reddit channels, or any of the other avenues they use to promote the wondrous works of Professor Tolkien. They provide unique updates and behind-the-scenes insights into all things Rings of Power, while also sharing lore videos and always diving into captivating debates on all things in the world of Middle-earth. So everyone, please welcome Harry.
Hello. First of all, thank you for that really lovely introduction. It's great to be on again. It's always a pleasure being on your guys' podcast. So yeah,
well, we're delighted to have you on.
Thank you.
Great
again.
to have you back
to discuss. Yes, thank you again. I remember this is my fourth time now. I think, or somewhere there. Am I up there with one of the most featured? At least third.
One of the most returning guests, for sure.
Most returning guests.
You were the most returning even when you were on for the second time. But yeah, it's great to have you back. And you arrived just like Anatar, and I hope you come bearing gifts. So physical gifts.
Indeed. Maybe.
Very good. So we're going to get straight into it this week, folks, because there's quite a lot to break down. And instead of going through scene by scene, we're going to actually go through each storyline in their entirety, and we're kind of just going to go through it that way. So we're going to kick it off in the same place where the episode itself kicks off, and that is with the elves. So what we're going to do, I'm going to try and just sort of set the scene. I'm going to remind everyone what happened in certain parts, and then I'm going to throw it over to Dave and Harry here, and they're going to give us their opinions and their expert views on whatever they think happened. And if you guys think that they're right, then great. If you're wrong, please get in the comments and tell them how wrong they are. So the episode opens up with the elves preparing to leave for Eregion, and they're worried about the safety of Celebrimbor. We've got Galadriel and Elrond. They're having a bit of a tit for tat. And then we get the first ever mention of distance, in my opinion, I think, from my reckoning, that Elrond says, quote, "If we take the Axa Bridge, Eregion is just under 150 leagues. And before I give it to the other guys' opinions, I'm just going to mention I love that kind of stuff. I love this kind of little trivial traveling world issues, and I think that was really, really cool. So I enjoyed seeing that. Then we have Galadriel and Elrond having a bit of a conversation about their, I suppose, routine military kind of battle strategies, or just what to do. And Elrond has a request for Galadriel if she can recommend an archer and a swordsman. And Elrond kind of threatens to find another lieutenant after Galadriel's a little bit salty with her answer. But I'm going to go to Dave first on that. What was your opinions on that opening scene?
Yeah, well, you mentioned definitely my favorite part was just the fact that they were mentioning time, distance, and they say it a little bit later as well, how, this will take 2 weeks, and I don't know if you're going to go into it, but even just the transition into the map and seeing them going through the world of Middle-earth and not just like arriving at their destination in the next scene, I was very happy to see that. And there was a couple of mentions in this episode about distance and time and the amount of time it takes to get from A to B. And that was probably one of the weaker things in season 1 that people were constantly complaining about. And we've already complained about it a little bit this season. So yeah, happy to see that. And the look of the Grey Havens, that was the Grey Havens, right? Yeah, that was lovely. I loved the look of it.
Don't you worry, Dave. Of course, I was going to mention the maps. That's
Johnny's a big fan of maps.
I like a map. What can I say? I enjoy a map, but usually Middle-earth maps. I'm more bored with actual real Earth maps. So then Galadriel says that she can recommend some people, but then remarks, "Who else shall we take with us, Commander?" And then we kind of cut to this Lord of the Rings type travel sequence where there's these kind of spiraling helicopter shots and there's these mountainous landscapes and these deep valleys and this tough terrain, and it was all just incredibly beautiful and visually stunning. But I think for me, it felt a bit weird because it seems like they didn't provide any sort of establishing shot. Like, who are the people that are running across these hills? There's just a party of elves, and it's just, we don't know anyone. And I mean, just comparing that to, for example, in the Fellowship of the Ring, where we get this like, long and drawn out introduction to all of the members of our fellowship, and then it's like, okay, now we're going to go forth, and when the ring goes south, and that's when we get those spiraling similar shots that I think they were kind of trying to evoke there. But now obviously they don't have time to give us this huge introduction to all the members, but at least show us like their faces before we see them like running at a distance. That's kind of the opinion that I got, but I'm not too sure. That might be just me. Harry, I'm going to throw it over to you, and you can comment on what I just said there, or just anything else in this whole opening sequence, or this part with the elves in the Grey Havens.
No, I do actually, in fact, agree with you in the sense that with the company, it's interesting because we, of course, you have Elrond and Galadriel there, but then we have 5 new people, which is, and yeah, the first time we did see them was straight away, and I felt like, I know we're jumping a bit, the Barrow-white stuff was very cool, but the traveling, for me, it makes Middle-earth, at least the show, feel a bit small in the sense that you're going from Lindon all the way to Eregion so quickly, as like just one shot. But I do really like the map stuff that they're doing in the transitions. That is very top notch. I do think I even liked in season 1 as well, even in the first few episodes when it showed, darkness spreading from Mordor all the way to Khazad-dûm before the eruption happens. So yeah, I like that. But yeah, we don't really meet when one of them already dies. But sorry, spoiler alert. Actually, I'm watching everyone breakdown it. It's fine.
Shit, we never said this. People, spoilers. There's going to be spoilers.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're breaking down everything that happens. So if you haven't realized by now, spoilers. Sorry. All right, continue.
Yeah. No. And yeah, so it's very interesting that we didn't spend much time with him. And I'm guessing with 4 episodes, we're not going to probably spend much more time with him. Potentially off some of the trailer shots, which again I won't go into because it's spoilers for future episodes. But but the actual within itself, it seems like they had them just there to support Galadriel and Elrond. It was very interesting throughout the whole episode, especially what they're doing with the characters, because it looks like they're getting pretty close, so to say, as in like close but pretty. Elrond seems still quite angry with Galadriel, which is very interesting. We see a lot of not digs, but like he's very stern. It's almost like a 180 of what he was like in season 1. So that's very interesting. That's the one thing that's really interesting. What they're doing with the 2 characters and the approach they're taking this season, which has been one of the most intriguing things for me, because clearly Galadriel knows she's wrong, but she's not been wrong much going into this season. And Elrond is getting really angry at Galadriel, but he's started to be wrong a lot. It's like they reversed the roles from season 1. So yeah, that's what came to me the most from that storyline.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think
we mentioned this in our last episode, I think, where they completely switched their roles.
There was one scene in the last episode that we just discussed, right? That was basically in the scene itself. I thought these characters have just done a 180, and basically I was like, Elrond is speaking Galadriel's lines and vice versa. So it seemed quite strange. However, there were parts that, and in saying that kind of self-explanatory, it shows that Galadriel was kind of starting to become a more, I don't know, I was warming up to the character of Galadriel, I think, definitely. In the last couple of episodes. In this one, I felt like she got petulant again, and she has to be the leader, she has to be the commander, and as soon as Elrond was put in command, it's like she can't take orders from him at all, and as soon as he says, would you mind recommending like a swordsman, she was like, oh, do you think I'm up to the task, kind of thing? And he's like, well, if you don't want to do it, I'll find someone else. And then immediately she just caves and she's like, no, I'll do it, it's fine. So there was that. I also find Elrond seems to be maybe not so kind of Summer as we did see him in season 1 all throughout, and even in the first couple of episodes.
Could be
maybe
a bit petulant.
A bit petulant as well, yeah.
Yes, that's because the roleverse, like, he's taking those traits as well from Galadriel.
And a little bit petty at times as well. Like, I mean, when we might as well get there now, the scene where we get that map transition and they come to the bridge that's fallen, and they ultimately decide to go south, which is the route that would be faster. And Dave, you mentioned that the 2 week period, that's what they were saying, that it's going to add 2 weeks to the journey.
Yeah.
Which, again, as we said, that makes this world just seem so much more large and so much more real. And at this point, it felt like Elrond was just choosing the opposite of whatever Galadriel said just because he didn't want to listen to her. And it wasn't more like, oh yes, I'm going to take counsel with my first lieutenant. I'm going to just say the opposite of whatever she does because she's wearing that ring and it's probably lying to her.
Yeah, I think that's more to do with he really doesn't agree with the ring situation, and he's like, I'm not going to take counsel from that trinket that you carry. So maybe he is feeling like I will go the opposite to that because I believe that Sauron or Anatar has corrupted this ring. Maybe that's what's going through his head. And maybe he is petulant. He's like, I didn't get my way, but I'm the captain now, so I will do what I want.
I'm the captain now.
He is the captain now.
Yeah, very, very good. Now, I don't want to harp on it too much, but as we just said there, that we've pointed out, it feels so much better when they speak about, okay, this is 150 leagues, and then later, just one small detail can add 2 weeks onto our trip. This is the same journey that Galadriel and Elrond took in episode 1 on horseback when they left Lindon and arrived to Eregion after whatever 500 miles or whatever that distance is, and they're within touching distance on horseback. Now, are you telling me that they've just ridden, for 10 days, 15 days, whatever, on horseback, and they're literally neck and neck on horseback? I mean,
like a Formula One race going across.
Yeah, exactly. Even in a Formula One race, if it went off for that length of time, there'd be hours of distance between first and second place. It wouldn't be microseconds.
I'm just wondering, did Elrond set up camp 2 minutes ahead of Galadriel when she had to set up camp for sleeping in that first episode? But anyways, we harped on about that. If you want to hear us argue over that scene,
so we're not. So I was going to say I didn't want to get back into it, but what I just wanted to say was here suddenly it's like, oh well, now of course it takes this length of time. And for me, I loved it, but at the same time, it just felt a little bit unearned because of the way they hadn't shown any of that before. So I hope that going forward it'll just be more of this and more of the same, and that the actual journey, because at the end of the day, especially the Fellowship of the Ring, the whole book is just a traveling book, and that's what we love. And it's not like, oh, let's just skip to the fantastical battle sequences. It's like, no, we as Lord of the Rings fans and as Tolkien fans, we enjoy those elements of it. We love to see them walking along and singing a song. Basically, that's what we want. So I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but there you go. So Dave, you mentioned it there correctly. You said that Elrond says this company will not take counsel from that trinket, nor will you. And also when he says that, there's this close up of Elrond. He just kind of walks, stands still, and lets the whole company passing by. And I have to just give a shout out to the costume department, because Elrond's costume is so cool in this scene. I love the little brooch he has and his little cape over his shoulders. I think he just looks absolutely class. And
he's looking good this season in general.
Yeah, they've let his hair grow out a little bit. I reckon by season 3 his hair is going to be coming down onto his shoulders, and then by I don't know, season 4, season 5, it's going to be flowing down his back. So I'm looking forward to that as well. That's where we get a cutscene and it moves somewhere else. I'm going to jump on to the next scene with the elves, which is the introduction to the Barrow-downs and the Barrow-wights. So just to set the scene, the elves have obviously gone south. They've been diverted there by Sauron or by someone who destroyed the bridge. And they arrive into this area. And they say it feels very uneasy. And one of the elves says, I feel no rest here. Even the trees seem ill at ease, which I thought was really beautifully put. And then one other overly confident elf just kind of strides forward, and he says, fear not, dead men are no threat. And immediately, they're going to get into trouble now, immediately. And then the elves walk forward a little bit more, and we hear a little whisper of a very familiar verse, which is, cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. And we don't actually get that entire verse in this moment. We get it later on. But what is that verse from, Dave? Where have we heard that before?
It's from the Fellowship of the Ring, when the hobbits encounter the Barrow-wights, which is where they should be. We shouldn't really be seeing them at this moment
Sure.
in time.
So what's your opinions on this? Did you enjoy that little... I did like what they did there with that little mention as well, that little verse, but what's your opinions on this scene?
Me? Harry?
Dave, sorry. Yeah.
Dave, right. I thought it was class. I thought the way the Barrow-wights looked, we saw it in the promotional trailers and everything. They looked great. They were very spooky. The eyes were cool. There was cool jump scares. I liked some of the references, like the hand coming out for Galadriel and it being cut off.
Yeah, saw that.
Just the way that they spoke. They were quite cool. I think, Harry, I listened to your breakdown as well, and you mentioned it that it just probably wasn't long enough, this whole scene. It kind of seemed more like, here's a little cameo from these guys that you may have heard of, called the Barrow-wights. I also thought it was kind of funny how, they talk about, I can't remember the name of the area, like Tiran something is, whatever the Barrow-downs are called. Yeah, but they were like, let's go this way. And then when they arrive, Galadriel suddenly like, they are called the Barrow-downs and these are called the Barrow-wights. I felt like there was a lot of exposition in this scene, especially when Elrond runs and gets like these swords and he's like, lore has it that these can kill. I felt like I was in a video game at that point. Yeah. He's like, kill them with this. And I don't know what lore he's talking about. like, yeah, I don't know if that's very Tolkien lore, but it's obviously a reference to the daggers of Western-esque. But were they able to kill the Barrow-wights? I don't know. Maybe just the Witch King and the Men of Agnar.
I think that might have been a slight twist of the lore there. So I think the lore that Elrond mentions in the series is the only lore that is not actually
his
lore.
Folklore.
But I'm just gonna explain the rest of the scene, and then I'm gonna come back and open it up so that we can discuss everything that happens in that scene. Maybe that's a better way to do it. So after the first mention, the first little whisper that one of the elves hears, the guy with the nice long blonde hair, he walks forward and he speaks to Galadriel and he says, "For a moment I thought I heard, it was almost like a song or the memory of a song." And again, I just took a note of that because I was like, cool. These are like two different extras who both had really lovely elf-sounding lines. And I was like, that's some really good dialogue. And I was happy to see that. And then they find the bodies of the Linden elves, the guys who had been sent out to warn Celebrimbor. And that's when they know that they're in for it. They're in trouble now. So these chains then fly out. They grab one of the elves, one of the extras, who, Harry, you mentioned before. And he just kind of gets dragged down some pit into his death. We hear some kind of weird like crunching and squishing sounds, and I'm like, oh, what are they doing in there? And then we hear that verse again. It comes out again in this kind of creepy whispering voice, which is really cool. And then this is when they have the full-on 360 view of our heroes, and they're all drawing their swords and twiddling them around.
Avengers assemble.
And kind of like that kind of vibes, all right. And then there's this sort of attack. But again, it's all kind of like in slow motion. I felt like it was kind of like they were like the Barrow-wights kind of, they appeared and they were in front of everyone very, very quickly, but suddenly they were like, okay, well, let's attack. And then the Barrow-wights didn't move. They kind of just stood their ground, and the elves all went up, hit them. And it wasn't so much that they were attacking them. It was more that like they realized, I'm going to cut off his head and it's just going to come back. And that was the major threat. The threat was that we can't kill them. And it wasn't like, there wasn't really any attack was what I was kind of, that was my feeling from it. And then again, one cool thing was that Elrond saved some other elf by stopping an arrow with his sword, which was kind of awesome. And Elrond showing his skills with the blade. And then someone says they're impervious to our weapons. And Elrond slowly sheathes his sword and says, "Hold fast, come with me." And he just sort of strolls over to a tomb.
Yeah,
and they open it and they head inside. And at this moment, slowly, very slowly, these like chains come over and they grab onto Galadriel's legs. They kind of just slither up underneath her. I don't know how she didn't see them. But anyway, she gets caught and she starts getting dragged off, the same as our extra elf who gets killed by the crushing and the squishing and the whatever happened there.
So extra.
She starts getting dragged, and then suddenly, 25 seconds later, after he's gone into the tomb, he's come out brandishing swords and spears, and he chops off the hand, which I also caught that, Dave. I thought that was a cool reference to the Fellowship of the Ring. Cuts off the hand and then starts handing out these other weapons. Well, actually, we just see him hand a spear to Galadriel, and he says, just basically, use these and fight. And so she starts fighting. We see another female elf who also has a sword, but we didn't see her get that or anything. So maybe that happened off screen. I don't know, but then Elrond breaks down the lore to the others and says that they can only be killed by the weapons that they were buried with, and then eventually they kind of do away with them, and they mention that these men were buried over 1,000 years prior, so something has obviously awoken them. And Galadriel says that someone is awaking evil across all of Middle Earth. So sorry for all that breakdown, but just wanted to sort of explain everything, and I'll go back and get your guys' opinions. So Harry, I'll come back to you on that whole scene. So jump in at any point you want. What was the highlights, and maybe what could they have done better?
In regards to the Barrow-downs scene.
In regards to Barrow-downs scene, or if you want to jump back to something that we skipped over.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll start off there, because I think David mentioned it earlier. I thought the fight itself, the whole mooding, the setting, the scenery, the feel of it, similar to when we enter Shelob's, I guess, second lair, in the start of episode 3, was very, very good. It was very horror-like. It was, it felt like good in the moment. It was just too short. It was like, I just thought they built up so much and they were killed so quickly. And of course, we spoke about the twisting of, how, white, technically kind of white ring wraith, swords work, then it's a whole different conversation. But it was, I did enjoy, first of all, as you mentioned, Johnny, hearing the poem, heard it in full. That was very cool. Of course, we'll go on to later on what more poems we do hear in the episode. But it was, I did really enjoy. The main thing was that we did see, when it came to it, Elrond and Galadriel did look out for each other. I feel like that was a very important thing.
Yeah.
And
okay, true.
and again, and I did really like that Galadriel, despite, season 1 being, people might say, she, the pettiness or whatever. I forgot, you used a really good adjective earlier. I forgot which one you'd used, but,
petulant?
People being a bit petulant, yeah. She's the first one who goes and tries to save the elf that actually did die, which,
yes,
of course, it was sorry, this might be a very separate thing. It's a very interesting that I know that everyone jokes about. They always say, the black person dies in a horror film first, and they've got a group of 6-7 elves, and the first elf to die in a horror setting is the black elf, and everyone else is alive. I thought, for a show that talks about how there's diversity so well and everything, it just some strange decisions, very strange decisions.
I kind of picked up on that as well. And what was kind of funny for me was, as soon as as I said before, there was this overconfident elf who was just like, "Don't worry, we're all gonna be fine. We should not fear anything." First. I was like, "That guy's gonna die," and then I saw someone getting dragged off. I was like, "Oh, I'm sure it's gonna be him," and then I assumed, I was like, "Oh no, it's a black guy." And I was like, he didn't even get to speak or say anything.
Didn't get to speak,
and it's typical horror movie trope.
Yeah, except from that, I think, again, and also being short, I did like the whole mood in the setting and the actual fighting, even though you could tell they were clearly stabbing at, tennis balls, something like that, or really solitary things. And it's an interesting whole other conversation about the show. The thing they do really well, a lot of practical effects really well. They try to do stuff on screen, practical as much as possible. But I feel like at the same time, it almost limits them a bit, because I feel like, I know they're trying to
move as much, is it?
If they couldn't move, exactly. They couldn't move much. It sounded a bit solitary. The fighting seemed like, I felt like, maybe. I know this might sound like blasphemy, but if a bit more of it was a bit CGI, it would, in a way, which is a really juxtaposition, would feel a bit more natural, because it.
Why is Michael Bay not doing this?
Yes, exactly.
More explosions.
Yeah, but yeah, it's but on roll, I did like that Galadriel and Elrond were able to, when it came to it, did help out.
That's a very good point. That, behind all of the kind of petulance and kind of, I don't know, just sort of, as I described, I can't remember which one of them, I described one of those being salty earlier, and I think kind of we're getting a little bit of that sassiness from both sides as well. But it's all kind of like conversational, but then when it comes down to the important moments, they do have each other's back. And I suppose I'm glad that you brought that up, Harry. So that's a very, very important point as well there. And again, lots of times we see more bickering and arguing between people who love each other and who are the closest. So maybe you said that as well, Harry, earlier, that they seem to be getting closer, and we're seeing them argue more. But maybe that's also one and the same, where the arguments and the little, like, small disagreements, it's because they feel, closer to each other, and they're able to do that because they're almost, brother and sister, or niece and nephew and auntie, or son-in-law.
Let's hope they stay that
and
way in this show.
Yeah, hopefully they don't.
Hate and love
lovers.
comes from the same area of the brain, so that's
right.
There's no issue there.
Right, so we're going to jump swiftly on to the next scene that we get with the elves, which is where Galadriel is speaking to Elrond, and she's telling him that she thinks that the ring is guiding her. And we got this in the trailer, I believe, as well. But then she also says that all elves are tasked to protect that which is most fragile and most dear, which is also, again, a lot more kind of dialogue that seemed quite elf-like, I found, in this episode. So I'm like, hopefully it keeps going in this direction as well, because it is nice to hear the elves sounding like elves. She then speaks about more painful sacrifices to come, and then she gets a little snapshot, a little glimpse of the future, maybe obviously from her ring again. Is kind of giving her this power of foresight, and she sees Sauron in his Halbrand form, and the kind of sacking of Eregion, and she sees Elrond being captured, and we see another shot of that crown, Sauron's crown. So we get a little flash to that, and then Galadriel asks Elrond to promise to put defeating Sauron, that task, ahead of everything, including her life. And Elrond agrees, and he says, "Yeah,
he's like,
sure,
no problem
at all, honey." And then this other elf interrupts and says, "We hear drums." And so that's when we jump on to the next scene, which is the elves spotting the orcs that are marching through. I'm just going to pause for a second before we get on to the orcs, though, and just see, Harry, did you think there was any significance behind that little conversation she had with Elrond there again?
Mm-hmm. In regards to, of course, even saying you have to protect my life, it's just, I think there the importance of showing the whole chat in general that we know where her priorities lie, and her priorities is keeping Nenya safe. And and even afterwards, that was very interesting when, of course, she does end up going to fight, Adar. Finding Adar. Mm-hmm. Elrond mentions that she did it not to keep us alive, to keep the ring, the thought of the process of the ring still alive. And I feel like that's what that was meant to establish. But again, it's very interesting almost how close they got at some point. I feel there seems to be something so weird going on between them two. Like, one minute they're arguing, then they get quite close, and then you feel like Elrond's almost gonna finally cave in. The next minute he's like, no. No, gives a little side thing, and then I'll be interested to see if this will last the whole season. But I feel like, for me, in my opinion, the importance of this whole conversation, and of course the flashbacks, we'll get into that, about how generally, I guess, it's foreshadowing of what's to come. It's interesting. It's like she's almost getting like, the mirror of Galadriel, almost getting like a little type of mixing that in with Nenya. Like, I feel like this is like kind of a moment where, when Frodo put his, of course, the movies, the book's different, whatever, but he puts his head into it, and then, looks into the water, and then sees the future. I feel like this is what's happening here as well, which is
completely
quite interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely, I forgot to mention that in our last breakdown in the episode where they got the rings and they were kind of speaking about the foresight, because I had that thought as well the first time she had that conversation with Gil-galad about just the rings were kind of heightening their abilities and the things that they already had, they could feel, but now they can see them. And I definitely got this image immediately of just Galadriel's mirror, because it just kind of clicked, and I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes complete sense. So I thought that was quite cool. So very good. Just to quickly mention the next scene, and then I'll come to you, Dave, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. So then we see that the elves have spotted this huge army of orcs, or this regiment that they're marching, and they're kind of they're singing Nampat, and it's all cool, they're having a great time. And then they just start sort of firing arrows towards the company of elves, and they're like, oh, we've been spotted. But it's like, no, they're just firing arrows at a horse that's running. I was like, is that Beric? What's going on? So I miss Beric. I miss him. I wonder where he is. So I thought that was Beric for a moment, and then suddenly we see that one of the arrows has actually hit one of the elves, which is orcs. When they're actually trying to shoot arrows at elves, they can never hit them. When they're not even trying, they take down.
Like stormtroopers.
Yeah, they're worse.
Stormtroopers,
not the worst of stormtroopers. So they hit one of the elves, and then Galadriel maybe accidentally kind of heals this elf with the ring, and they're like, they can see there for in front of the eyes of all these elves, this ring, this is the power of the ring. It can just, you get hit with an arrow, no problem. Bring up the ring and we'll sort that out. So then, as we said there before, and as you mentioned, Harry, Galadriel's like, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to like sacrifice myself basically to save this ring. She gives the ring to Elrond, makes him take it, and then she goes off. She's like, I'm going to take on this army solo. And one of the elves states that she has sacrificed herself to protect them, and Elrond corrects this elf. He says, no, it's to protect the ring. So we probably could have come to that conclusion ourselves, but Elrond kind of just stated it out there nice and clearly for everyone. So we were definitely getting that confirmation. And she takes on this army, as I said, all by herself, and she's actually doing quite well until she bumps into Adar, and he says, quote, "A star shines upon the hour of our meeting, Lady Galadriel," which I was like nice that he gave her full title as well. So I quite like that.
Very nice.
And so that was cool. So Dave, Galadriel taking on an army all by herself. Did you think that was a good idea? Could she not have maybe given the ring to just Elrond and said, you go and me and the other guys, we'll all take on these orcs? Or what was your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think that's, if it was being realistic, it probably wasn't a good idea, but for movie, TV show reasons, they wanted to show Galadriel looking badass, and I think they achieved that very well. I thought like this was a really, really cool fight scene. The way she maneuvered around the horse and everything, shooting the fire arrows. Again, it's one of these things where it's like, I feel like we saw most, like 60% of this in the trailer. And if you want to hear me and Johnny rave about that, go check out our previous episodes, because we talk about trailer spoilers all the time. But yeah, I thought in general, I really enjoyed the fight. Now, just jumping back to the power of the ring, we had also talked about this in maybe our breakdown of episode 1. I was mentioning how I was very curious how they're going to portray the actual power of the ring, because it was very interesting in Peter Jackson's trilogy, the subtleties that they use with the ring. It was all about like close-ups of the ring and stares with Frodo or Boromir or Faramir or whoever came into possession of the ring. And it was really well worked, but I knew it wasn't going to be done the same way here. And as well, you're going to want to individualize the rings. And I think I was very happy with seeing the kind of flash forward, or the vision that Galadriel had, and even just her talking about how she feels like the ring is guiding her. She also has one of these little flash forward things to the Barrow-downs and the Barrow-wights. And I also said, how did she know about this? Maybe that just wisdom came to her from somewhere, and maybe the ring was kind of a conduit for this wisdom. So I like all that stuff. And I also like the healing of the trees and the way everything looks all bright and beautiful. But then there is this scene of her, as you put it, Johnny, accidentally kind of healing a guy. I thought, like, I don't know exactly what the reactions are for most people, but I'd say this is the more controversial one, because this is more like a superpower rather than an improvement of her own
it's more like
abilities.
high magic.
It's like high magic, and the fact that, the arrow kind of falls out. Now, I just think, for the sake of a TV show and to just showcase how important and how magical and powerful these rings are, they are the rings of power. I'm okay with it. I think I'm more than okay. I actually kind of liked it. I just think that's as far as it should go. I don't want to see like wizard battles like in Harry Potter, where they're shooting, I don't know, big juicy lights at each other. So
yeah,
that's as far
I didn't
as I
mind
wanted
it
to
at
go.
all either. I didn't mind it at all. And if anybody is against it or saying this is an abomination or whatever, think back to Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring, where we do get a wizard battle and we do get the kind of, weird
But that's class, John.
telekinesis. I know it's class. I think it was deadly as well, and I loved it. I'm just saying, if people are out there kind of going, this is an abomination because this should be more subtle. I know that
maybe you're the abomination. That's what you should be thinking. No,
I'm the abominable snowman. That's what I am. Anybody who's listened to our podcast before, they'll know that I'm a big fan of subtlety, and I love just kind of things that you're kind of going, oh, was that because he's a wizard? Maybe not. And like, wow, he's really riling up the team, and he's encouraging them. Is that because of Nenya? Is that because of his ring? I don't know, maybe, and it's not just like put right in front of you and you can't be like, there you go, that's because of the ring. So I like the way that it's really subtle, and but again, in this instance, as you said, for the sake of it being a TV show and to kind of get people on board with the fact that these rings are really important going forward, and as you said, the show is all about the rings of power. They need to be seen as to be powerful. So I don't really have any problems with that at all.
I have a quick question as well, so you guys can both have at it. We've mentioned it a couple of times. Nenya, which is obviously Galadriel's ring, and that's the name of the ring. But when are we going to hear that, and how do we think the ring is going to be called out? When do we think that the rings are going to be given their names? Harry, I suppose you... Well, don't tell me if you actually know this answer, but what do you think might be the answer?
Well, I actually, in fact, don't know, so I'm more than happy to speculate here. And I feel like before in the press, and then they're doing interviews, they do mention Nenya, and in the interviews before the episodes, they do mention all the rings by name. So surely, from my thinking alone, for my thoughts alone, I'm guessing season 1. End of season 1, the rings have been forged through Elven rings. End of season 2 is maybe the naming of them or something. But I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't this season. I think because it's been mentioned by name specifically, it does make sense. Or maybe they'll wait until the One Ring is forged, and then they'll give the naming to the rings. But yeah, I do hope, in my opinion, that is this season, because I feel like it's just something that you don't need to wait till season 3 for. Like, it's something that can be happen now. Like, it's not like the biggest thing in the world, but it is still important, and yeah, I just don't see the need just to wait so long again to name them. I feel like they can get the opportunity now, because they are basically with their future ring bearers until, of course, Gandalf gets his, and then from Círdan, and then once spoiler alert, Gil-galad does meet his demise at some point in the future, Elrond gets his. And that's the irony as well with all this. He's going from like a enemy to lover with his rings. Yes, he will. That's the irony there.
That is quite ironic.
The showrunners don't like to name things in this show, do they? They like to keep us all guessing. Yeah. We're like, who's Sauron? Who's the wizard? Who's the dark wizard?
The thing is, we know the names of the rings, and I feel like they've almost missed their opportunity to name them, because it's like if they leave it till the end of this season, we'll already be moving on to the dwarven rings and then the men's rings. And it's like, oh, by the way, the elven rings. And we're like, who cares about them? We've seen them for ages now. So I don't know. It might be something that just is mentioned in passing at a later date, I suppose. I doubt they'll actually. I don't know, my personal opinion, I don't think they're going to make a big deal out of the naming of the rings or anything like that. I mean, they barely made a big deal out of who actually got the rings. It was just like, oh, it fell beside Galadriel, let's just give it to her. So I doubt the naming is going to be a big, important process. But so that's now again, took us a little bit of time to get through that elves storyline, but that was the main arc of this episode. So general thoughts, I'll come to you first, Dave. Your general thoughts on the Elven story. Do you like the direction it's going in? Is this an improvement to where it was? Is this kind of gone down again? What do you feel?
Yeah, well, I suppose we could talk about the whole episode at the end of this breakdown, but I suppose just to dally up that little part of it, I think it's probably my second favourite part of the episode, but still, I like seeing the Barrow-wights and the Barrow-downs. It was cool. I'll give it a thumbs up.
Thumbs up from Dave. Harry, are you enjoying the way the elves are going?
Yes, in regards to, I like the whole baggage that's coming around it as well, because I did like how even this episode alone, I know we could talk about this at the end, it did feel like its own movie in some sense. So I liked how self-contained and specific it was to the Elven storyline. Like, we know when again we did get some cool moments between Elrond and Galadriel and more character progression there. I still think it's going a bit too fast. I feel like, it just they are seemingly focusing specifically, because we're not saying the Elrond and Galadriel storyline, we're saying the Elven storyline, and that would also mean the other 5 elves we've met, and we haven't really met them yet. So
for that, remember any of their names.
Exactly. I think one of them is called Canmere or Camnir, from what I remember. But
yeah.
Except from
I think the guy that died was like darn door or something like that.
That was just because he was falling, and someone said, "Oh darn!"
Yeah. No,
Into that door.
Yeah,
Darn door. Yeah, there's a door
No.
down there. Darn. Yeah. I think
Generally, I'd give it more of a up than
generally
a down,
thumbs
but
up.
yeah. Generally.
For me, I think the overall story, I think it was quite interesting the way it's going. Definitely a plus to get to see the Barrow-wights on screen. If there's any purists out there who are saying those are not Barrow-wights because it's not the right time and they shouldn't exist yet, yes, you're correct. But again, I'm going to just kind of give it a pass because we know there's so much compression of time. Not only that, there's as we've seen before, it seems like there's a compression of the maps. It just everything's kind of together. So if something is just slightly out of place, well, not slightly, quite largely out of place in time, I mean, it's not the best thing ever, but there's
what are you gonna do about it?
I think there's bigger problems. So for me, yeah, it's definitely good to see them on screen. I thought their scene could have been a little bit longer, as you mentioned, Harry. I thought it could have been a little bit scarier. I thought the choreography could have been a little bit, I don't know, just slightly better. I think that the actual action sequence of Galadriel fighting later on her own, I was way more looking forward to seeing the fight scene with the Barrow-wights, but then I ended up enjoying the later one more. But I don't feel like I'm loving the way, I don't know, Galadriel and Elrond are just talking to each other. I just don't like this kind of, it's kind of like bratty, and even what we saw, it's kind of a continuation of what we saw when they were chasing each other on horseback at the start of the season. It's kind of a little bit similar to that. So I feel like the most elven type dialogue that we're getting is coming from the extras. So big shout out to those lads. Sorry, I don't know their names, but they did a hell of a job in this episode. So fair play to them. We'll check them out later, and maybe we'll try and add their names into the description. But moving on to the next story, which is going to be a shorter one. Well, still probably the other most important story is the story of Rune and the Stranger. We're going to focus in on the Stranger and some other important person. So starting off here, we get to see the Stranger. Obviously, in the most recent episode, he's created a big sandstorm and a tornado, and he's blown away his two friends, Nori and Poppy. And so he's walking around and he's trying to find them after that had just happened. So he bumps into, I think, I'm trying to remember, did it say in the subtitles, did it say like a gardener is humming or something? I can't remember.
Yeah.
It listed him as
He's
a gardener,
following a goat first, and then it's like gardener
following a goat.
humming, yeah.
And then it says gardener humming, and then we get to see, here he is, Tom Bombadil in the flesh, and it's his first appearance on the big screen. And he says, his first sentence that he says on the big screen is, "I see you found the goat." And then
that's brilliant. It's so meta. Like, he is the goat, Tom Bombadil. And he's like, "I see you found the goat."
You found me. Yeah. And then the Stranger responds saying, "It wasn't quite what I was searching for." And he says, "Well, there's what you're searching for, and there's what you find, isn't there?" And then we also, as soon as he said that, he turns around and he tends to his garden again. And it's the first time we get to hear as well his little "Hey doll, merry doll, ring-a-dong-dillo." So I like that his stupid little hummings were just kind of things that he hummed to himself, and I thought that was really, really well done. We'll get into the whole what our opinions of Tom Bombadil on screen was. That's an important part. But for me, just first opinions, I thought that was really nicely done and it was really cool. Then the Stranger asks about the stars over his hill, and he's showing him the map of the stars, and it gets blown away on the wind. But it almost seemed to me that Tom was kind of controlling the wind, and then it lands on this tree, which I thought was Old Man Willow, but it was a kind of a representation of Old Man Willow. We learned later that it was called Old Man Ironwood, that was the name of this tree. And the Stranger, while he's going up to reclaim his map, he sees this beautiful and delicious looking branch, and he's like, "Oh, I'll have me a bit of that branch." He just starts tugging away on this branch, trying to break it off the tree, and he says that it looks like a staff, or it looks like a gand, which is another word that they've been using for a staff, which I'm sure has something behind it. And yeah, as he's trying to pull it off, he gets trapped in the very same way that we see Merry and Pippin getting trapped by Old Man Willow in the Return of the King movies. So yes, Harry, first introduction of Tom Bombadil. What do you think?
So, for like from the start, I feel like my always thoughts Tom Bombadil is like, I don't think he would ever fully be what I'd hoped it to be, because I don't think you can do it in the way Tolkien
Of course.
did, because it's just meant to be something that's so different, so otherworldly, that it just didn't feel like it should even be part of this world, and that's why it wasn't part of the Peter Jackson movies.
It was the impossible task, really.
Yeah, the impossible task, and that's why even originally he was meant to be just like a little. You meant to just be hearing him sing in the background, which was meant to be a little cool Easter egg, but that of course didn't happen. But despite that, all I wanted then, after knowing that, and of course, the show can't change much about that now because they've decided to have him in. All I just want is when he's on screen, for it to feel like this person is something else, something that's not part of the other 50 characters we've seen so far. He is like his own thing, like almost not, even though he's of course part of the world, and he said he is part of the world, he's just something else. And I feel like, in my opinion, they did get that. It did feel like he was otherworldly. He was like almost something, a spiritual thing. But and I do think they got that nailed ahead, and that was the biggest thing that I was worried about. So I did feel that, and that's what I was fine with. It's just the accent. I was like I was born in England. Sometimes I still wasn't understanding fully what he's saying. I know they said they wanted to go for a Cornish accent, but I feel like it doesn't fit Tom Bombadil. I'm not sure if you guys agree or disagree, because that's probably something that some people either love, think it does sound correct. For me, I just don't know. I just feel like Tom would be a bit more like not a higher pitched voice, but a bit more softer than he sounded. But Rory Kinnear still did a brilliant job, and I did feel that despite it never being truly what it can be, because it being what it can be, him not being on screen, it was still felt like, we met someone who almost you were not meant to meet. And that's what I feel like that is with Tom Bombadil. He's not meant to be part of the story. And yeah, it did feel like that in some regard. But on the side, that's why I think the rest of the Rune storyline is a bit dragging the episodes on a bit. But, and I think that's quite a shared testament so far with the shows, that some of the runes, there's a lot of it, by the way, like a very lot.
Yeah.
I even potentially think there was more of Rune in this episode than of the Elven storyline, which is technically the main storyline. But the stuff with the stranger is always good. And one final thing with Tom, I know I'm skipping here and then everywhere, but
That's fine.
I thought, yeah, Tom Bombadil did feel otherworldly. It just sometimes, I'm not sure if you guys saw the dialogue between the two. It felt like, oh, so I am meant to face Gandalf. Sorry, not Gandalf. I am meant to face Sauron and the evil wizard. It felt, as someone mentioned, it felt like a video game, or like, it was like a retelling of an event. The dialogue, it felt a bit, just like matter of fact, like statements, things. So, but despite that, I feel like they've got at least the core theme of it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Dave?
Yeah. First, before I give my thoughts on Tom Bombadil, but just because Harry mentioned it there about the amount of time that we're spending in Rune, I just thought this was interesting from, I'm sure we all know Digital Tolkien on Twitter or X, and he's broken down the time distribution towards each plot line. So he's got like the amount of time given to the Numenor, Khazad-dûm, Lindon, Rune, Pelalgir, Mordor, all that kind of stuff. So at number 1 is Lindon, which is good. It comes in at 53 minutes and 5 seconds of screen time. This is kind of general-ish at the moment. But at number 2 is the Rune storyline at 47 minutes and 44 seconds in just 4 episodes. And yeah, Harry said like Rune took up a lot of time in this episode. Pelargir has taken up 44 minutes again. So, and then I'll just jump down to the bottom, because the bottom we have Khazad-dûm at 15 minutes and 28 seconds, and Mordor at the very bottom at 13 minutes 28 seconds.
Guys,
so like
your two strongest parts of your series, you gotta put them out front.
Yeah, like, so that was something we discussed a lot last season, that we weren't getting enough of Lindon and Eregion, and like, fair enough, they've upped the Lindon stuff, but Khazad-dûm, I think it's a testament to all fans. Everyone is saying they absolutely love the dwarves and they're loving everything they're doing there. I assume we're going to get a lot more in the latter episodes, and Varking is going to be delighted with all that. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there, because that's probably why we're feeling the way we're feeling about some of the first episodes, good or bad. But yes, my opinion on Tommy B, as we like to call him here on the Melon Heads and the Council of Elrond, Harry mentioned his accent. So at first I was put off by it, And I was like, really, is this the accent? Because we talked about the accent before the movie came out, and did you say it's a Cornish or Cornwall or an old, like one of the, what is it? Cornish, yeah. So that's, I think Rory Kinnear talked about how it's one of like the oldest accents, or like old England. So he wanted it to feel, as he says himself, he's eldest. So he picked this accent, or they came to this decision for this accent, and I was like, oh wow, okay. I got used to it almost immediately though, but I did on my second rewatch of this episode, I was like, Tom Bombadil is basically Hagrid. He sounds exactly like him. He looks exactly like him. He does the same thing with the stranger, where he's like, you know, he's teaching him, you know, you're a stranger, Harry. You know, he's doing the same thing, and I could just see him now in the next episode. You're a wizard, stranger. Yeah, like, I should not have said that. I should not have said that. So I thought that was interesting. But in general, I agree with Harry. He did seem otherworldly. A lot of people are talking about him not being jolly enough. I think we can give him another chance in another episode, because we're going to see more of him. But somehow I think he's not going to get much more jolly than he is at the moment. But I still think he is kind of out of this world. His magic is kind of weird and random. The only part I didn't like was towards the end of his conversation with the stranger, where he cared a little bit too much about Sauron and the fate of Middle-earth. And like Harry mentioned, he's kind of like, you must face him and the Dark Wizard. And then he's like, can you not? And he's like, no, I'm for wandering. But I feel like he doesn't, if this was the real Tom Bombadil, he wouldn't be saying like, you must face Sauron and you must face, he'd be like, who? Oh, Sauron. Yeah. Oh yeah, he's not great, is he? Like,
young Sauron, really... is he still living over there by those mountains, is he? Yeah.
But I loved his dialogue where he talked about the stars being newcomers and saying they poke their holes in the sky, and it's like a bunch of beating eyes down here, and some of the way he described himself, I was actually quite surprised. I think as soon as I heard the accent, I kind of was like, oh no, they're going to butcher Tom Bombadil. And then like after his scenes, I was like, I actually loved that. I really, really thought he did a good job. Maybe wasn't super jolly, but it's impossible to do Tom Bombadil the way everyone perceives him, because everyone perceives him in a completely different way. But I think they actually did a pretty good job. So yeah, I'll give a thumbs up for Tom Bombadil.
Good stuff. I'm going to have to say, out of the three of us, I think I was the only one that didn't mind the accent at all. I was just like, I was on board from the get-go. I was just like, okay, that's what they're doing. That's fine. And I think Cornish people are usually pretty jolly. I just kind of think of, is Ian Holloway, is he Cornish? He always seemed quite jolly in his, post-match press conferences. And he wasn't, again, it's just, I didn't know how they were going to do this. I was really worried that it was just going to completely fall flat in his face. It's going to be a disaster, because it's, as I said at the start, it's an impossible task to try and, personify Tom Bombadil on screen. And I think that this is as close as what they can do to try and get it as perfect as possible. So I think I definitely just want to commend them on their effort. I think it was a really, really good effort. I enjoyed. I take both of your points, Dave. That's a good point towards the end, that he shouldn't really be kind of guiding the stranger to like, I'm going to train you up, and it's going to be like a Rocky montage, and you're going to, by the end of the next episode, you're going to be wielding that staff like there's no tomorrow. And I don't want to see him being like the Mr. Miyagi to the wizards. That's going to be, or to the stranger. That's going to be a bit strange. But as a character that they've just brought in, I thought he was great, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm going to jump over a little bit to another scene in Rune. Now, just for this little storyline, I'm going to do the Dark Wizard and the Stranger and Tom Bombadil together. I'm going to leave the Harfoots and the Stoors to a separate storyline, which we'll get through those shorter storylines towards the end. So I just want to try and keep it moving here. But we swing back to the Dark Wizard, and where he's getting a briefing from the Tusken Raider, who claims that this E-Star is stronger than they expected, and the wizard tells him he's either very foolish or very brave, and he tells him to leave the E-Star to him and to concern himself only with the Harfoots. And then also this raider, or what's they called them again?
They call him a Gaudrum.
A Gaudrum warrior, Gaudrum raider.
He just calls him Galdrum.
He calls him Galdrum, but in an earlier part, while he's speaking, it says like Galdrum warrior or something. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, so he's part of a Galdrum tribe or whatever. And then he goes to the wizard and he calls him Galdrum. But it's like being like, here, elf or whatever, you know. So maybe that wasn't actually his name. That was actually his type of people that he is.
Yeah, no, his name was like, it began with a B.
Okay, so his name wasn't Galdrum, yeah. So I think I think that must be their tribe. They must be the Galdrum tribe or whatever. But he tells this guy, he's like, okay, well, we know that the wizard is heading north and he's going off to see the hermit. So obviously that's how they refer to Tom Bombadil. They think he's just a hermit living off there, and they don't realize obviously that he's going to be this very, very powerful being. That's just a quick scene that we get. That's all we really got of that dark wizard today. So we jump back then to Tom. And Tom is just coming over and he's going to release the stranger from the tree who's still trapped in there. I don't know how long he was in there. He's probably in there for a good while. So he releases him with the exact words from the book and the same as Treebeard in the Lord of the Rings as well. However, there's no releasing song. He just kind of comes over and it's like, you know, in the books, he comes over and he sings the song and that's what releases him. And then after the hobbits come out, he says those words like, you should not be waking, dig deep, drink water, go to sleep. Whereas here, that's the only thing he says, just that you should not be waking.
Same as Treebeard in the movie, I suppose.
Same as Treebeard in the movie, but I was like, oh, that's just a little like tip of the cap in the movie to Tom Bombadil. I expected Tom to have a song to actually get the tree to release them. But, you know, I'm not going to go back and say that it's all terrible, but just like, you know, that's what was their decision. Then the stranger asks, who are you? And Tom says, back in the Withy Windle, folk used to call me Bombadil. Tom Bombadil. Very Bond, James Bond kind of vibes, I thought. I was like, Bond, Tom Bond, or Bombadil, James Bombadil. Then the stranger's having a bath. We cut to that, and Tom is singing with Goldberry. And when I saw the scene, I was like, this is class. And Tom comes in, and he like throws him the soap. He's like, wash your face and scrub behind your ears. And I was like, this is giving me definite like book vibes. And it was just really reminiscent of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Mom
book.
vibes.
Mom vibes as well, yeah. So that was quite nice. But then the stranger questions who was out there with Tom. And he says, I thought I heard a woman. And Tom says, woman? What woman? Is no one else here with you? You're here. That is, I think you are. Are you? And the stranger says, yes. And then Tom kind of chuckles and laughs and exits. So I don't really know what's going on there. When I heard Goldberry singing and he was like, come on, Goldberry, don't be bashful. And she joins in and starts singing. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm interested to hear your opinions on this, so I'll come back to that in a moment. But I want to know what's going on with this Goldberry character. If she's just kind of something that maybe she's a spirit that comes to Tom from time to time and he doesn't want to tell anybody that she's around, or I don't know, maybe it's I guess we'll see. Hopefully that wasn't just a one-hit wonder. Hopefully we'll get to hear what was actually happening there. So then the stranger joins Tom by the fire, and Tom does some fire magic, and he turns the map into bread, and he talks about the stars as newcomers, which Dave, you mentioned there, and I just written down in my notes, talks about stars as newcomers, and then in parentheses, cool, because I thought it was quite cool, that part. I thought is really cool. Really interesting. I like that dialogue there. And the stranger asks who he is again, and once more to us who have read the books, Tom says, don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me, who are you, alone, yourself, and nameless? But you are young, and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Then the stranger asks, what do you mean, eldest? And Tom replies, eldest, and nothing else. And that's cool. I really love that. I really love that scene. It threw me off the first time he pronounced eldest, because he says, I can't remember how he says it. He says he says eldest. He puts the emphasis on the end of the word, and I was like, that's not how you say that word. What are you doing? But then he goes on and he says, Tom was there before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. And then Tom explains that the whole area used to be green and is now sand, and that's basically the reason he had to come and see for himself. The stranger suggests that the tree could lend him a branch, and Tom says that he should have tried asking the tree for the branch. And then we get some more fire magic from Tom, and the stranger is blown away by this, and he asks Tom to teach him how to wield a staff. And Tom replies, A wizard's staff is like a name. It's yours to wield already, if you prove yourself worthy of it. You show today that you're not, yet. And he says, whether you can become so, we shall soon discover. The stranger then remarks that he was never meant to find the stars and that he was meant to find Tom. Then they hear these hoofs and they see these people arriving, and they're more of these Gaudrum, is that what they were called?
Yeah.
And the stranger asks why they are hunting him and his friends, and Tom tells him that he's not the first Eastar to have shared his fire, and that the Dark Wizard arrived many years ago and probably started out like the stranger, desiring to control magic, but then his strength grew and his power grew, and now he controls basically all of Rune, but he still desires more, according to Tom. But he won't achieve it until he gains a more powerful ally. And then they mention, okay, this is Sauron, that the ally that they want to, that the Dark Wizard wants to align himself with. So now again, who is this Dark Wizard? If he may end up teaming up with Sauron, I mean, there's possibilities that this could potentially be like the Witch King, because we know he was a sorcerer or whatever before. Or I thought maybe, this could be Kamul. He could end up being the Easterling who becomes one of the ring race as well. Although I think just Tom's mention of the fact that he is one of the Eastar, or one of the Istari, that would kind of rule them all out. So he can't be the Witch King and he can't be Kamul. He has to be one of the 5 Istari. So I'll get your opinions on that as well. The last thing then is Tom tells the stranger that his task is to face both of these Dark Wizard and Sauron. And we've already mentioned a couple of those things again, but I just wanted to go through it all and go back to you, Dave. That scene as a whole, anything in particular? Give me your first of all your thoughts on that scene with Goldberry. Did you enjoy that little cameo? Did you see into it more than I did?
No, not really. I thought it was. I thought it was nice. It was nice to hear her in the background, but I'll tell you my thoughts on some of the other stuff, and maybe Harry's got more to say on that, because I don't know. I didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. Yeah,
but for some of the other stuff, I thought the whole thing with the tree, or what's his name again, Mr. I was about to say the Whomping Will, with the tree, where he was like rescuing the stranger out of the tree.
Old Man Ironwood.
Old Man Ironwood, yeah. I kind of just felt like, we're doing this throwback again, like they did it in Peter Jackson's, which was a nod, and now we're going again. But a little bit
unnecessary, was it?
Little bit. Getting on to Ciarán Hinds' character, as soon as Tom Bombadil was like, you're not the first Eastar to have sat with me here and eaten, I immediately thought, like, this guy is one of the Blue Wizards, and obviously the stranger is going to be the other one, so that gave me hope. But then immediately the stranger was like, oh, you're talking about Sauron, and I was like, so I don't know. I think we've already talked so much about who the identity of the stranger is. We didn't learn much anything newer in this episode, apart from a lot more Easter eggs and references. But I think that's all I have to say on that. Like, Harry, if you have any more information on Goldberry.
Before you come in, Harry, just want to ask you what you meant with that, Dave, when you said that he was talking about the other Eastar and then he said Sauron. Because he said to him, you're not the only Eastar to share my fire, and he spoke about the other Eastar, and he was referring to the Dark Wizard.
No, he was referring to the Dark Wizard, and he basically said something about the Dark Wizard needs one other person to like
more
fulfill
powerful.
his task. To be, to become more powerful. And I felt like, is this going to be the kindling of these two wizards joining up?
It could still be. Tom might be reading it wrong, or maybe he might be telling him exactly what he needs to hear.
Exactly, and the stranger immediately just went, Sauron, and I was like, okay, right. I was wrong there.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure what you meant. I thought you meant that he thought that Sauron had sat by his fire with him or something like that. Sorry, I just wanted to clear that up. So Harry, any other thoughts on any of that? And then also maybe the Goldberry reference?
Yeah, so I don't think we'll see Goldberry this season. I think that hopefully could be something we'll see in a future season if they come back to Tom. I feel like it's meant to be more of an Easter egg more than anything. And if it is meant to be an Easter egg, it means probably that maybe he knows Goldberry is real. The audience knows Goldberry is real. The stranger doesn't. I think they're playing it on that dynamic like that. So that's my opinion on that. So she is real. She is in the world, but it's just meant to be something that they're just not approaching this season. So yeah, that is all.
I feel like if they wanted to do that, they could have done some sort of like the stranger like sees a kind of a blurry vision of her walking off, and he's like, "Who is? Did I see someone? Was that?" And then Tom just kind of doesn't mention it. But
yeah, saying maybe they thought they'd have to make a costume and everything, a design for her. Because then once you go to that, then you might as well just have her in the show. So
okay. Again,
but who's the voice?
This is off like this is just. I'm assuming the voice is the same one that appears on the album. Who she sings 2 different songs. She sings. So I can't remember her name either. But when you listen to the album, her name is listed there as well. She's got a beautiful voice. I just imagine the sandstorm. The thing happens. That sort of throws the stranger off. He bumps his head. He kind of wakes up and he's in a bit of a daze. And he sort of sees Tom, and he sees this kind of blurry vision of he hears the voice of Goldberry, sees a blurry vision, and then the stranger doesn't know, was that just me hallucinating, or was that me kind of coming to, or was she real? But then maybe he could ask Tom, by the way, did I see a woman earlier? And that's where Tom could kind of go, don't know what you mean. So, but the fact that he hears someone singing and then he walks out and there's no one there, I just thought it was quite strange just the way it was done. But
I think that'll be answered soon because everyone's asking the same question. It's not just like Tolkien fans. Everyone's going to be like, what the hell was that about? So they'll definitely address that scene again. One thing I wanted to mention as well is we do see Ciarán Hinds' character. I always give him a shout out because he's Irish, but he stands up and he's like, you deal with the Harfoots, I'll deal with Sauron. No, he says, I'll deal with the Eastar. But it kind of reminded me, because in case people didn't realize, we didn't get to see any of Lindon in this episode. We didn't get to see any of Anatar scenes, Khazad-dûm, any of that. So when the Dark Wizard got up and said like, I will take on the Eastar, I was kind of like, are we going to see that in the next episode? Because even this Tom Bombadil storyline, they just dropped it halfway. So a lot of people are complaining about the pacing of season 1 and season 2, but it was just strange how halfway through the episode they just dropped that whole storyline. And I don't know now, are we going to get to pick up in the start of the next episode, the end of the next episode, 2 episodes time? And now we'll probably talk about it now. We've got an introduction to a whole new tribe, and I feel like they should probably be cutting off storylines than adding new ones at this point. There's too many scenes, and it seems like we're adding more made up plot to a story that already requires a lot of time to explain itself. So that was just something. It kind of annoyed me as soon as Ciarán Hinds stood up and said like, I will take on the Eastar. I was kind of like, here we go, and then we didn't get to see anything, and I was like, actually, when will we see the next dealings?
Probably that could be like the next episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Harfoots and the stoors. So obviously the last time we saw Nori and Poppy, they were being swept away in a sandstorm. And I was like, surely they'll have broken legs and, they'll could be dead, both of them.
Just
but
broken spirits.
They wake up, not really, completely unharmed. They're totally fine, but they are being followed by someone. So they jump over a ridge and they roll down this steep hill, and it's 100% evoking Lord of the Rings vibes from the Fellowship of the Ring and the Merry and Pippin rolling down. Yeah. Well, all 4 hobbits, rolling down with their shortcut to mushrooms. So I don't know if that was, I have not seen any. I haven't even been on Twitter today, or I haven't seen anything, so I'm not sure if that's something that other people are saying, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're going for.
One thing I just want to say about that scene, because I don't I doubt anyone else has picked up on it, but go back and watch that scene where they roll over. Basically, Nori goes first, then Poppy rolls down the hill, and this is definitely kind of, in my opinion, a movie mistake. As soon as they get to the bottom, as soon as Poppy finishes her little fall, there's clearly a set member fans a big large piece of dust behind Poppy. It's so weird, like they both land and then it's just like a big piece of dust comes out. It's so, like, if you go back and watch it, I saw it the first time and immediately I was like, I just need to skip back there. It's so badly done. Well,
and you want to know a little fun Easter egg? Mistake. if you look how Numenor is spelled in episode 3, they've got the wrong thing on the top. They've copy and pasted the one from Rune and probably put it on Numenor. But it's meant to be a cross like that. It's that It's
it's meant to be an accent.
Yeah, accent. They got the accent wrong on Numenor, but I don't think anyone's picked that up yet. So.
Oh
wow. Exclusive.
What a nerdy Easter egg and a mistake. Yeah, that's cool.
That's a big one though.
It is. You can't be
like
spelling
writing
names of places, and when it's printed on the screen as well. If it was in a subtitle or something, you'd be like, whatever. But that's interesting.
It's because the rune has RHU. The U has the
U. Yeah, exactly.
And they've just probably whoever who's like put on the design people who doesn't know Tolkien, which is fair enough. You don't need to be a design person to know Tolkien that much. Has probably just copy and pasted it over, and it's like it's got all the cards.
That's definitely what happened.
I wonder would that change the way Elendil pronounces it instead of Numenor? Would he be like
Numenor? Yeah. Just completely.
Anyways,
Right, moving on. So the where were we? Nori and Poppy, they bump into this new character, Merrimack, the stoor, and they convince him to take them to his village. Pretty easy to convince him. He seems like a bit of an idiot, this Merrimack. He agrees only if they follow the 4 rules, and then he says the first rule, he says rule number 1, then rule B, and then rule 4. And this is some attempt at stoor humor, but it falls completely flat. And I was just like rolling my eyes. The only redeeming factor was when Poppy said that she wasn't paying any attention. I was like, well done, Poppy. Neither was I. Did you enjoy that, Dave?
I thought it was hilarious. Like, I got up this morning, went to the movie, or went to this release yesterday morning, whenever the episode came out, and I was listening with my headphones in my bed at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was there proper laughing, like, especially with the accent as well. Number 1, don't do this, and then B. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, really?
Maybe it was just a bit delirious.
Maybe I was in a cranky mood when I was watching it. I was like, oh my god, it's so terrible. I was like, even children would be laughing at this, but then I forgot that you exist. So yeah. I know, that makes me feel better. I'm glad that made you smile. I'm glad that made you laugh. So then that means that it obviously did work for some people. So that's good. So then we are introduced to the stoor village, and they live in this big, like, I don't know, excavation dig site, it looks like. And Nori remarks, and she says, Harfoots living in holes doesn't seem natural. But again, just a little mention of a hole. And I thought we'd get a little bit more like a hole in the ground. In a hole in the ground lives a stoor or something like that, but not quite. But we did just get the mention of living in holes, so that was quite cool. And we get to meet the leader of their tribe, who is a lady called Gundable Earthaller. And she informs us that they are indeed stoors and they are not Harfoots. And she's not too happy with these intruders coming in, and she says that she threatens to, quote, feed you leg, limb and joint to those Gaudrim hunters. So it's not just the Harfoots that are a ruthless bunch, basically, and they're completely brutal. So their cousins and stoors are also just like, if you don't do exactly what I want, well, we'll just let you die, and that's the way it goes. So same as the Harfoots being kind of just leaving each other behind in season 1. But Nori pleads her case anyway, and she is ignored, and they're put in chains. And she talks about her friend, and this woman asks, who is your friend? And she says, he's a giant. What, like an elf? Bigger than that. So he's a great big grand elf, she says. And yes,
Grand Elf the Grey.
Grand Elf, with his Gand that he keeps going on. So it's Gand and Grand Elf with his Blue Wizard is taking a back seat, guys. I'm losing faith with every episode. So I think that's the biggest hint so far of the potential Gandalf story. Now I'm sure there's going to be loads of people out there that will be delighted if the stranger does turn out to be Gandalf. But I think a lot of us are still on Team Blue Wizard, but I guess we'll see. What's your feelings on this, Dave? You want to jump in on that?
Sorry, I just want to jump in because I think it's going to be one of those things where there's going to be someone's going to be calling him a grand elf, and then somebody's also going to be saying like, take your Gand, and then he's going to get all confused, and it's just going to be like Gandalf. I don't know, but I don't have much faith in how this is going to develop.
Is it going to be like a hold the door situation?
Yeah. Hold the door.
Hold the door.
Hold the door.
Gandalf.
Yeah. I'm not so sure. I'd like to see people put it into the comments below and let us know what your thoughts are on it, because as you know, myself and Johnny have talked about this naming of the stranger so much. So Harry, I know in your breakdown as well, you talked about it briefly. So yeah, what do you think? Where do you think this is going?
Well, in my opinion, I think he is, and unfortunately for you guys, I think he is Gandalf. I think, in my opinion, what's happening here, Kieran Hines is a blue wizard, and potentially he's killed his other blue wizard counterpart. And that is why they sent Gandalf over to help sort it out in the east, which, in retrospect, should have been Saruman, because in the Peoples of Middle-earth, the blue wizards, they turn evil, Saruman goes to the east, and then sorts them out, which means maybe the stranger Saruman, does look a lot like the actor who plays him, looks a lot like Christopher Lee, but I do think it's Gandalf. And building on top of that, yeah, I think these hints, I don't think they'd go Grand Elf to then not have it be Gandalf, because remember, Tolkien fans, yes, we're a bunch, but 80-90% of these as average audiences who, for a fact, know Gandalf. And if you hint Gandalf for a whole season and then make it another wizard, for most people, they're going to be like, what's going on? And that is why I think, for that reasoning alone, which is separate from like a lore reason or anything else, more of a logistical reason, I think, yeah, it's Gandalf. And
Marketing reason as well. Yeah.
Marketing that is the reason why I think, yeah. But the interesting thing there is we still potentially get a blue wizard in Kieran Hines. So it's not the be all and end all.
That is quite an interesting take. And yeah, that makes me feel a bit better about everything. If we do get a little blue wizard and him being an evil blue wizard, that'd be quite cool. And also, I was going to say that the branch that he was trying to rip off that tree, it does just look very much like what we see being Gandalf's staff in the Peter Jackson movies as well. So yeah, I think it's almost a closed case on that one, unfortunately. But we're gonna, Dave, anything you want to say there, or can I move on?
Let me see. I also just wanted to point out that Mary Mac's hair looks crazy. He looks like, I don't know, I was trying to think of some like 70s pop star, probably a woman. I couldn't think of it. I was like Googling different 70s pop stars. I was like, it's not Stevie Nicks. It's not, yeah, maybe Cher. But yeah, his hair, what's going on there?
Just looks like apart from that, in the Halloween shop.
Yeah, I think he was cool. I think I would like to like the stoors, but it's just a new Harfoot plot.
Yeah, there's no time for them.
There's no time for them. But look, hopefully they all die soon. That's what we were saying about the Harfoots in season 1. But yeah, no, I think we're good to move on from there.
Yeah, no, there was, again, so we're just going to finish off that scene with the Harfoots. So the chief then basically tells them that they're going to be cast out at sunrise. She's conferred with the elders. And then Nori replies that had he been in her shoes, Sadok would have done the same. And then Poppy fills in the obligatory surname details and the formalities. It's like, yes, Sadok Burrows. And she's like, oh, Burrows. And she's kind of taken aback by that name. And then she brings them over to this wall where we can see these hieroglyphics, and they're showing the origin story basically of the stoors carved in the rock wall. And it seems that there was an old stoor, and he dreamed of the Shire, pretty much. They called it the Suzat. It's basically dreaming about the Shire. And he set off on a quest in a caravan, or with a caravan of people. And he was looking for this land, and he promised to send someone back once he had found it. And this guy was called Burrows. So that was the name and she tells him the story, and she said that was the last we heard of him. Then she asks if Nori has come back to take them to the Suzat. And Nori unfortunately breaks the news that they never found it, and they are actually constant travelers and constant wanderers. And then that's when the big folk arrive, and they are questioning the leader, and she gets a big slap across the face. So as soon as she's welcoming them in, they just smack her and knock her to the ground, which again should definitely knock someone unconscious. It'd be like slapping a toddler like as hard as you can across the face. Like that's going to do some damage. But she just kind of gets up and she brushes it off, and she doesn't give up the Harfoots, which was really cool. And they threaten that she'll be sorry, basically, if she defies the Dark Wizard. And then they just turn around and leave with no more questions and no more, are you sure you haven't seen them? It's just kind of one question, no, I haven't seen them. Okay, well, you better not be lying. And then they just leave. So that was the end of that scene. Any final details on that, Dave?
Just on that, I think like the what do you call it, the distance of the actors from the other actors, forced perspective. I thought it was really well done in the scene, just seeing the size of like the tall people.
Huge, didn't they?
Yeah, they look class, and like that big meaty sword, the way it wandered in front of the store hobbit. Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. But that's
so visually that was quite cool. That was quite cool, that visual there. And I like the whole idea that there's, this is where they originated from. They set some guy off to go and he ends up getting lost and just wanders forever. But it was interesting. But as I said, when I was watching, I was like, come on, can we just get back to the main plot or whatever? But so we're not going to dilly-dally anymore on that story. We're going to jump straight on to the final story of this episode, which was in the Southlands. Now, it opens up where the townspeople are all searching for Theo, and Isildur is feeling guilty, and Arondir tells him not to worry, and basically that Theo is going to be grand. He's like, oh, Theo, he's a strong lad, he's been through worse, he'll be fine. And then they're marching out at nighttime. They're carrying torches, and Arondir comes across this body just ripped into pieces. And then we cut to, must be the next morning, they're having a town meeting, and everybody's like shocked, and they're kind of going, these animals out there, they're killing people, it's war, we need to attack. And Arondir is suspicious of Estrid. Now again, Arondir also says, I don't believe that it was men that did this, but that's the townspeople are just like, yeah, they're not men, they're animals. And during this meeting, Arondir is kind of looking at Estrid a little bit like, I don't know now, I'm not sure about her. Then we cut to a scene of Estrid and Isildur. They're having a little bonding moment by the aqueducts, and she's really impressed with Isildur's handyman work, and he's able to fix the plumbing, and she's like, oh, he'd be a handy lad to have around the house.
He talked about it in the previous episode as well. He was all about house plumbing and all that kind of.
I like to get my hands dirty, roll up my sleeves and all this. And she's like, oh.
I just want to quickly put in here because Harry's going to have to head soon. So I think if we just get the main thoughts on the next biggest thing that happens in the episode, which is the Ents. We could talk about that for a bit, and then we could say goodbye to Harry, and then yourself and myself can continue the episode for
That's fine.
The rest of the guys, and maybe we can also ask best moments, worst moments of the episode. But Harry, do you want to? We have the introduction of the Ents in this and Ent Wives. So what are your thoughts on everything we see here?
Definitely, and for me, the reason I really want to talk about these is because, in my opinion, the end stuff is probably the best parts of the episode for me personally. I'm not sure about you guys, but I think the moment of Arondir was absolutely incredible, and also having the person who plays, I forgot who in Harry Potter, Professor something called.
I can't remember his name, but that guy,
Slughorn. Yeah, that was amazing, and I feel like that was some of
who did he or she play?
I think the male professor
one. Okay.
So the male Ent,
The male Ent, yes.
Okay, that guy who voiced the Ent was in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Professor Slughorn.
Don't know who that is, but sounds like a nice lad.
Basically, it's actually Jim Broadbent. He's a very famous actor outside of this.
Okay.
You'd probably be
you'd know him.
Yeah, you'd know him. But yeah, so I thought, in my opinion, that stuff was the best. And even though, again, we're spending a lot of time in Pelagia, I did think it was worth it in the end. And I think I would link that with what I thought. I know you guys said at the end you do the best and worst parts. That for me would be my best part, were the moments with the Ent and the Ent wife as well. And I think the forgiveness takes an age really hit home as well. I feel like that you truly see, these creatures, they live for a long time, and just the effects it has on them and stuff like this, seeing their friends die, I thought was a really cool touch. And so that's, in my opinion, I know Isildur, Elrond had no clue what's happening with that worm creature, came out of nowhere. We, of course, got, I know you probably get onto the deepest unknown creatures in the deepest depths, so I'll let you guys talk about that. But
Yeah.
I'll quickly, do you want me to quickly do my worst part of the episode?
Please,
So I
yes, yes,
Oh
still,
yes.
yeah,
yeah,
dude. That's the
and I think
best
it's
part
no,
for us.
yes, and I think without no surprise, it is some of the store stuff. I felt the stuff that, as Dave said, dragged on a bit too long, and yes, for me, I feel like the only reason I don't like it's the worst part because it's too much of it compared to stuff, as again you mentioned earlier, we should be spending more time on, and that's the reason why it is the worst.
Right. Yeah. So that is we're going to get to Dave and my best and worst parts towards the end, but I think we can all probably agree that maybe the stoors are maybe an unnecessary storyline at this moment because we've got so much that we need to get into with the other storylines. So sorry, Harry. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up there?
No, that's it, and I think I'm excited for what's
Okay.
next. So yeah,
Okay.
looking forward.
Very,
And
very
again,
good.
thank you.
So yeah, do you need to jump off now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll welcome you back again in the future for sure.
Again,
Yeah,
thank you. It was a really enjoyable hour and a half with you guys. I think we got to discuss a lot, which was we're very, very happy about. So yes, thank you again. Very much appreciate that.
All
I need
right,
to see you guys soon as well. That's another big thing. So yes,
yeah,
hopefully
that's it.
soon. So, yeah.
We'll
we
have to
need some
organize.
beers.
We'll have to organize something. Yeah, exactly. So really, really good to see you, everyone. Thank you so much. Please, everyone, head over. I'm going to give a little mention about your channels and all that at the end of this, Harry. So everyone, go over and follow Fellowship of Fans. They do so much good stuff. So right, Dave and I will move on from here. So Dave, we're nearly there. We're towards the end now, and basically we've seen. Well, let's just talk about the Ents for a moment because we've already had that brought up. So the Ents, what was your general opinion of them, Dave? Did you like the visual, artistic, the way that they've gone there with that? It was a little bit more subtle, I think. Maybe the faces were kind of like they weren't so obvious, I think. But what was your general opinions?
Yeah, I like the Ents a lot. I think one of Harry mentioned there, like one of his best moments of the episode where he talks about forgiveness takes an age, and unfortunately, again, that's another thing we saw in the
Spoiler.
trailer. But I really did like how she explains like how they are, how the process and the length of time of healing a wound. She's like, the sap has to cover over the wound and the bark has to regrow again. And I can't remember exactly what she says, but like it was quite a good analogy for how a wound takes time to heal. And she uses all these tree analogies. And I thought, their general language, again, you talked about some of the elf extras. They had a lot of, very elven like dialogue.
Yeah.
And kind of Tolkienistic dialogue, and I thought the Ents as well. Like at one point, the male Ent, he kind of, or maybe the female, one of them goes kind of enraged, and she starts saying something about root and acorn and bark, and all this kind of stuff, and really was Peter Jackson's style.
That's when she was getting really angry about. They were talking about the orcs who had passed through, and that they were, very similar to when Treebeard himself is like, he hates them, and he's like gnawing, hacking, burning. They come with axes. It was kind of reminiscent of that.
Yeah, very similar to that. I also thought it was cool that they were freaked out by the sword, but it was kind of interesting that they were like, "Have you ever laid axe upon wooded life?" And I was like, "Of course!" Like, look at Círdan, the shipwright. Look at every elf has done this,
don't
like
tell them, just be like, never. They don't have a lie detector machine,
Yeah, well, like that's definitely not like lore accurate at all. Like in the
no, of course not.
In
But
the
what
book,
is
like,
interesting is that we get to see. What is interesting is that the only person we get to see cut down a tree in the series is Arondir in season 1 when he had to.
And
I
knew,
but again, it was nice what he said. What did he say? It was something like to my pain.
Something like that.
And it's because we saw him cut down the tree in season 1, and he like prayed a blessing over that tree before he cut it down because the orcs were forcing him to do it. So,
dude, just lie. Like you're literally about to be crushed by a huge big tree.
Have you ever laid axe to bark? She'd be like, never.
No,
I don't even know what an axe is.
No, I wouldn't touch the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did they not know what a sword was for? Because they've been around for millennia. And they're
Yeah,
like,
they
what
just
is
saw a
that
big
thing? And you're
army
like,
of swords passing through as well. Like,
exactly.
dude, open
Yeah.
your Ent eyes. I did think there was one part now I was giving a second rewatch, and I rewatched it on my laptop, so the screen was a lot closer to my face. And I thought at one point I saw the Ent was like smiling, I think the male Ent, and then it turned into a frown. But instead of the actual mouth moving into a frown, it was like that part of the tree kind of faded away, and then a new mouth formed above it, and that was kind of like a frown. And I was like, that is a really interesting way. It's kind of like the mouth isn't in a structured
It's not
position.
in a locked location. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, that's very interesting and like well thought out if that's the design they went for. But
Maybe
yeah,
it
I
was
don't know.
just
That
an
was
error.
it could have been an error. Again, I'm also exhausted from getting up early yesterday to watch
Yeah.
this, and then but yeah,
I know what you mean. I watched this. I didn't start this episode till about nearly 12 o'clock last night. I watched it. I finished about 1 o'clock. Then I got up this morning, worked all day, and then as soon as we're finished, I kind of just quickly watched it a second time. I haven't had loads and loads of time to kind of study the Ents, but maybe this is a bit controversial. I didn't love them. I didn't love the design, I should say. I saw them in the trailer, and I preferred in the trailer, and the voice of the woman who is the female Ent, I think was really good. She's reminded me of that like old willow tree from like Pocahontas or something, which is like the grandmother in the tree or something. And it was very similar to that. But as when I saw it play out on the screen, I was just like, again, some of the dialogue and some of the things that actually happened during that scene, I loved it. I thought they were really, really, really great. The interaction with Elrond I thought was really cool as well. But just, I don't know, there's something initially about the design of maybe not more so her, maybe the male Ent. His design is a bit weird, and again, maybe if I go back and watch it again, I might change my mind on that. But my initial opinion was like, oh, it's a bit strange. I'm not sure if I like it, but yeah. Anyway, it's not the end of the world. It was just one of those small things. We're gonna jump back the way, guys, because we kind of got ahead of ourselves there when we had to say goodbye to Harry. So we're just gonna jump back. And we're going to see what else was happening in the Southlands before they meet the elves, which was that we were on the moment where Estrid and Isildur were having their little bonding moment over the aqueduct. And that's when Arondir comes in and he breaks up the little love fest, and he discovers that Estrid is a wild man, or one of the wild man clan. And Isildur immediately feels really betrayed. And then we cut to the next scene where she's chained and they're bringing her up because they want to use her to help them find the wild man camp. And then we cut to Theo up in a treehouse with the wild men, and they're having a little chat. And I don't know, nothing much to say about that. They're calling them well fed or whatever it is again, or plump. I can't remember what they said.
Well fed, yeah.
Then we cut to the next scene, which is the quicksand scene, and this is the scene where we get the mud monster again. Spoiled in the trailers. I mean, honestly, there's just it's unbelievable. But anyway, what we saw in this episode, what we saw in the trailer, this mud monster thing. First of all, Isildur gets trapped in the quicksand, and he's like, "Don't worry, it's fine. There's no problem at all." And then he starts moving, he starts sinking. He's like, "Oh crap!" And then you can see something's like grabbed onto him, and that's when he really starts to panic. Arondir grabs his arm, tries to pull him out, and they both get pulled in under the mud. And then suddenly Estrid is like, "Can I just run away?" And she turns and runs, and we're like, "Oh, she's bolted." But then she comes back and she starts poking the mud monster with a stick, and I was like, okay, she's trying her best to help these guys, and she obviously doesn't know there's a monster in there. She's just putting in the stick to try and get them to have something to grab onto. The monster appears, and it turns out to be one of the nameless things, is what Arondir calls it later on. And we know the nameless things are mentioned by Gandalf when he talks about having traveled through the mines of Moria, and he says that there are nameless things. And I think does he speak about the nameless things in the movies? Or he doesn't. He says there are orc and fowler things.
Yeah,
fowler things in the deep places of the world. Yeah, so I don't think we actually get a drop of the quote nameless things in the movies, but they are mentioned in the books. And what was your opinion on this nameless thing, Dave? This mud monster, and also what happens? You can play out the rest of the scene.
Yeah, well, obviously the mud monster kind of Jonah the whales, both these two characters, and they're in the belly and they kind of stab their way out. So that was interesting. I was like, can they
We've
survive
seen that kind
that?
of thing many times before, but it was cool.
Yeah, okay, it was fine.
It was fine.
It was great, but like I was surprised. This was another time where it just felt like they were just trying to shoehorn a little Easter egg into the episode, like kind of like kind of similar to the Barrow-wights, except this was just way more like, I just felt like this was an afterthought, and they were just like, oh, let's just have a worm thing, and then another guy being like, let's say it's a nameless thing, and Elrond here even says, I think he says nameless thing in the deepest places of the world. I'm like, this is literally on the surface. I imagine
He didn't. Did he say in the deepest places? Oh, maybe he did.
I think he did, and that would be book accurate. And
Yeah.
guys, if you don't know much about the nameless things, we discussed this in our Moria episode, and the reason we discuss it in our Moria episode is because they live. Well, Gandalf talks about these creatures that live underneath Moria, underneath Khazad-dûm, where the dwarves live. So, like, they live in the deep, dark places, and they're so big and scary. Gandalf is afraid to talk about them. The Balrog is even scared of the nameless things. So, like, they're supposed to be like I just imagine them as huge, terrifying creatures, and this is just like a little worm thing. And I thought the design was cool, but I don't bother calling it a nameless thing. Just be like, whatever. Now, I did find it quite hilarious when he goes, this one we can call lunch or supper or whatever.
Supper, yeah. That was quite cool. And like
was a
Arondir, he's
few
always
funny
so
moments.
serious. He's like Arondir is so serious, and then when he kind of cracks this little joke, I was like, yeah, go on, Arondir.
Yeah, I really like Arondir.
Yeah.
I thought, I guess I didn't love Bronwyn from last season, but like, I thought like maybe just the whole storyline, but I feel like she was dragging him down a bit. I think he's really coming into his own this season, and I think just
finding
his
his
acting.
stride.
Yeah, I think his acting is brilliant, and he's just he really emits elven energy, if that's a thing. I don't know. I'm really liking him.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that he's not just tied to a love. I was about to say a love triangle, but a love story. I'm glad he's
a
just
single man now. He's out in the market.
Exactly, like he's finding his way in the world, and I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have much more to say about this plot? Because
No, not about the unnamed things. I think that. I wrote down here there was a mention of, and I wrote down quote, unnamed things in the deep places of the world. So obviously he must have given that entire quote, which is book accurate. But as you said, could not be more.
But not accurate to the eyes.
Deep. It's like it's literally on the surface. So I thought the design was pretty cool. It was pretty scary, but I mean it was scary, but it didn't even scare Estrid. She was just kind of like was poking it with a stick, and then it comes out, and she's just there. Like she just kind of stood back and was like, oh, and I was like, I'd be like just legging it, the opposite direction. But anyway, as you said, they cut through the belly and they jump out, and then they have a little giggle. So they were like, that was fine. We dealt with that unnamed thing, no problem. Then we cut to the next scene where they are sitting around a campfire. There's a little lake beside them, so they've been able to wash all that muck off them. And then Arondir leaves a little key down for Isildur to decide whether or not to free Estrid. And of course he does. And then he tries to kiss her, and she immediately steals his sword, and she tries to tell him that she will never be accepted by the other people, and he tries to convince her that she will. And he's like, I don't know, he's all of a sudden madly in love with her, and she's like stabbed him in the thigh. Then he's found out that she was like part of Adar's gang.
It's not a euphemism, by the way.
Yeah. And now she's stolen his sword, and she's holding his own sword up to him, like as if she's
again not a euphemism.
And he's still just like, come here and give me a kiss. And then that's when Arondir shouts for her to drop the sword before she gets absolutely nailed by a tree, which should, again, that should kill her instantly. There's no
dead.
If, buts, or maybes. Again,
dead.
Same as like the Harfoots getting swept off in this sandstorm and getting absolutely like flung, God knows what distance they get thrown, and they wake up, not a scratch on, they're completely fine. Estrid getting hit by, like, if you get hit by a tree, that's the same as getting hit by a bus or something.
Truck.
And
she's
with just
power.
Like it was just, I couldn't believe the slap she got. It was amazing. And then then the tree tries to step on Isildur when Arondir just shouts "Stop" in Sindarin, and the Ent or the Ent wife is just immediately like, "Okay, I'm not going to step on this guy who I was a millisecond away from stepping on." But she stops, and then she asks Arondir if he has ever chopped down a tree, and he admits that, quote, "to his great pain," he has. And again, they attack Arondir and Isildur for about 5 seconds, and then they relax and they just start up a friendly chat, and they are telling about the orc army that passed through. And I think Harry broke down quite well before that scene with forgiveness takes an age, and that was really well done. As I said, I didn't want to say that I didn't like the scene with the Ents. I wasn't mad about their design when I saw it play out, especially the actual Ent, not the Ent wife. I think her design was better, and I loved the color of her leaves and different things like that. But so we got all that, and then Arondir promises to make sure that the trees of this wood are left in peace, which was quite nice as well. I did enjoy that. Then the Ents release Theo and the Wildman, and Arondir greets Theo, and we see that Estrid is completely fine, and Isildur tries to kiss her again, and then this time her husband shows up, or her betrothed shows up, and he's like, "Oh, there you are." So Isildur is really not in a good mood now. He's tried to kiss his woman so many times, and every time there's like an Ent shows up, or her husband-to-be shows up, and he's like, oh, God damn it. But then Theo thanks Arondir, and he seems like he's very happy with him again. And Arondir invites Theo to come with him to confront Adar and basically to go on this cool quest. And Theo refuses and says that he's got other things that he needs to attend to. And then Arondir calls him Lord of Pelargir, which I was like, what? Did I miss something? I think he's been living there for like about 3 days, and suddenly he's like, "You are now the Lord of Pelargir." But anyway, that was the end of that scene. I didn't really think too much about that title that he gave him, but it happened, so I thought I would mention it.
I thought at the time I just thought it was like, a fun thing a father says to his son, where like, the Lord of the Hill or something like that. Yeah. But I have seen a few people online talking about how this could be very interestingly a setup for Theo to be actually the King of the Dead. I know there was talk about this before the season as well. So the King of the Dead, for anyone that doesn't know, in the Return of the King, he's basically the cursed guy who Aragorn calls upon. And it was actually Isildur that basically cursed him or banished him, and made sure his life was a living hell and became undead. And it would be cool,
I'm liking that,
if he does actually get to be with Isildur and strike up a little bit of a friendship with him, in the Rings of Power, and then later betrays him, doesn't come to his aid, and then Isildur banishes him. That curses him. That would be cool. Because a lot of people have talked about how Theo could be, one of the Nazgul, so one of the kings of men, but it could be cool if he's the King of the Dead. So starting off as the Lord of Pelargir would be an interesting start.
Never heard that theory. That's an interesting one. All right. Yeah. I like it. I'm excited to see. I don't necessarily like Theo's screen time. He's getting a lot less of it in this season, which I'm quite happy about. I will say that in the few scenes that I've seen of him so far this season, I think he's definitely grown up and matured as an actor. I think he's a little bit better this season than he was in the last season, but we haven't seen that much of him. And I wouldn't say he's my favorite. His is my favorite story when I see it on screen, but I am kind of excited to see where they go with it. I'm excited to see how they do it, and I want them to do it in a very short time, but to do it well.
And off screen.
So yeah, exactly. Well, they do a lot of stuff off screen in this season, in this show, so maybe they could do that. Theo is now the Lord of Pelargir, and in the next episode, now he's the King of the Dead. But I think we can bring it to an end there, and we can say that is everything that happened in this episode. That was quite a meaty episode, I would say. There was a lot to break down there with them. The introduction of Tom Bombadil, the introduction of the Ents and the Ent Wives.
The introduction of Harry from Fellowship of Fans.
Yeah, exactly. Again. So before we finish, I'm going to throw it over to Dave and ask you for what we are doing now for every episode, which is your best moment and your worst moment. So what was it for you this time, Dave?
Will I give you both?
Please do,
Okay, I'll start with the worst. So I'd say probably maybe there wasn't a specific moment, but we all knew this was coming. But the introduction to yet another Hobbit storyline, there's a few moments within this the whole scene. I think just like the way the camera moved in around the actual village, and I was like, this is really nice. And if this was episode 1 of season 1, I'd be like, this is cool, getting to see this. We're getting new musical themes, all that. But I just kind of felt like, how much time are we going to be spending here? Is this like, this doesn't seem to me like it's just going to be a little, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you for an episode, and then on our way. It's like we're getting names of new characters. We're getting all these little,
these and it's like bringing purpose to the whole Harfoot's origin,
and then also the final scene talking about like the Shire, or the, what do they call it, the Zurzat or something like that.
The Suzat.
There's the Suzat, yeah. I just kind of felt like, okay, so it's going to be all about the Shire, and I just felt like we never thought in a million years that this story, like, it's probably going to be 5 seasons of the Hobbits finding the Shire, and it just seemed like, no, this is taken away from everything. But yeah, I also have a little shout out for that Isildur sinking scene. It really reminded me of, the Simpsons, when Homer's like sinking, he's like, and now I'm going to get my feet out with my hands. He's like, and now I'll get my hands out with my face. That really reminded me
funny. Oh man, I haven't thought about that scene in years. Yeah.
And my best scene, which I was surprised at myself, I'm surprising myself in so many ways, just seeing Tom Bombadil portrayed and not like hating it at all. Like, I was really pleasantly surprised with how Tom Bombadil came off. And also something that we didn't mention in the episode as well was, I really thought, especially when he was talking about who I am eldest, when he was saying all these words, the music in the background was like swelling and dropping, and it sounded so beautiful. And then it like intertwined with the Stranger's theme whenever he started to speak. And I just thought that scene was so beautifully well done. And I'm looking forward to going back and just rewatching that whole clip again. And I really hope they keep that up for the next season, for the next couple of episodes that we do see Tom. Like, I hope it's not like we're giving him a huge introduction and now we're just like, yeah, he's part of the cast, he's just going to have regular lines of dialogue. I hope they keep up the awe and the mesmerizing the quality that he brings to the screen. So so those are mine.
Really, really good. Really, really good. And as you mentioned there, I'm glad you mentioned the music as well, because Tom's theme is so beautiful. I've been listening to the album quite a lot, and that's the one that I keep on putting on repeat. And if you listen to it, it's Rufus Wainwright who sings on that, and his voice is just perfect on it as well. But even when you see in the scenes where he's there's obviously no singing going on, just the melody and the theme in the background is just, and it sweeps through, and it
hums
really,
it a little bit as well.
Yeah, he hums it as well, but I think it kind of captures his essence. And I'm going to say that my best moment that I wrote down was also Tom Bombadil. So you seemed a bit surprised at yourself that you were doing that. When I saw him on screen, and it's like after 2 minutes of seeing him, I was like, again, as I said, it's an impossible task. He's never going to live up to your expectations. But I think this is damn near as close as they could get. So I think they did really, really well. And I think Rory Kinnear did a fantastic job. And again, I didn't have a problem with the accent. I enjoyed it. One of the reasons why maybe it was my favorite part was because a lot of the dialogue was taken straight from the book. So
true.
The dialogue was kind of easy for them to do. And like, we've read those pages so many times, we've seen that, like, when someone asks him, who are you? When Frodo asks him, who are you, master? And he says, don't you know my name yet? And he's like, that's the answer. And so when I saw that play out, I was like, this is just really cool. The scene of him popping in, checking in on the stranger while he's having his bath, hearing Goldberry singing in the background while he's bathing, that's just like so reminiscent of Lord of the Rings. And
just keeping the mystery as well with that whole Goldberry thing. By the way, as well, we do have a really good episode on Tom Bombadil on the Council of Elrond, so we'll drop that link in the bio, in the description, and you guys can check it out there to get a full breakdown on who the character is from the book.
Sure. So just for me to mention that was my favorite scene, and my least favorite scene, again, fitting with the rest of you guys, is the stoors. And if I had to pick one moment, it would be what me fell flat was that terrible joke about 1B and 4, and I was like, this is such terrible humor.
I loved it. I loved it so much.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm like, okay, well, there is some people that enjoyed that, but I was just like, oh, this is just terrible. And I was just like, I remember I saw that, and I was just like, I feel so bad for that actor who obviously, I was like, he obviously thinks this is the worst thing I've ever had to say on camera before, but obviously the director was just like, come on, one more take. He's like, oh no. But anyway.
How many more takes? C.
B.
Yeah.
Right. So there we have it. That's it, guys. We want to know what you all think of this week's episode. Please remember to get in touch. Let us know your best moments and your worst moments from this week's episode. Or maybe it was just all one big best moment. You can find us on Twitter or X at melon_heads. Remember, that's melon with 2 L's. You can also find us on Instagram at melonheadsofficial. And please, if you haven't already done so, head over to Fellowship of Fans channel and give them a follow, because they are so fantastic. Everything they do is amazing. They have a huge team of people there that really, really bring Tolkien's work to life. And you can just see that they all have a huge passion for Professor Tolkien and for Middle Earth in general. So thanks once again so much to Harry for coming on. He was fantastic as always. He's one of our most common returning guest at this point. Mm-hmm. And thank you to all of you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Council of Elrond.
Ring-a-ding-doo-loo.
See you guys.